Typically, when you're an offensive or defensive coordinator and you're looking to break out on your own and get your first NFL head coaching job, to me, you want to look for one of two situations. You either A, want to look at an absolutely horrible situation because the bar of expectations is set so low that if you come in and do anything worthwhile at all, it's going to create some nice job security for you, give you time, which is an incredibly valuable commodity to have as an NFL head coach. The more time you get, the more time you have to potentially put your program into place and what have you. So, you look at a situation that could be terrible, but maybe take terrible and make it not so bad. If you're an NFL head coach, you want to do two things. You want to get your first job, you want to make the playoffs, and get yourself a contract extension. It's just that simple. So sometimes taking over a terrible team is the best way to go. For other guys, you may look at it and say, I want an established, proven franchise type of quarterback because I know that in order to win in the National Football League, you've got to have that guy. And either you have that guy or you don't. And if you have that guy, you have a better chance for success. And that's a way to go too. And Mike McCoy ultimately took that path. Here was a hot offensive coordinator name. He was with the Denver Broncos, and here comes this opportunity in San Diego. You've got Phillip Rivers in place, so you leave Peyton Manning to go to Phillip Rivers. It's not a tremendous big step back. It's, in theory, a good situation to go into because a franchise quarterback should equal success. And a guy like Phillip Rivers has had some success throughout his NFL career. Now, as time goes along, things like injuries can most certainly derail a team, even with a franchise quarterback. And the San Diego Chargers, at times, especially over the past 2 years, have been very unlucky when it comes to the health of their team and the number of injuries they've suffered through and had to try and overcome. All the while, you've got this specter hanging kind of in the background of the relocation talk. Are the Chargers going to move to Oakland? Are they going to move to Los Angeles? Are they going to move here, there, or everywhere other than San Diego? And while we can sit there and say it shouldn't be that big of a deal, translating it to the real world, if you're working a job and all of a sudden you start hearing murmurings about your job maybe relocating, one, you're worried about whether or not you would even have that job when you relocated. But two, assuming you would have that job if you relocated, if you've got a wife or a husband or kids, families, you've got to think about all these different considerations, and they eventually will trickle over into your work and affect the quality of your work and your performance at your job. So you're trying to deal with all of this, and when you're Mike McCoy and you're trying to deal with a less than stellar front office, General Manager Tom Telesco came into a mess left by A.J. Smith and hasn't done a lot to really help it out that much, I don't think. You got like a guy like Eric Weddle go in free agency and get nothing in return for him and don't have a replacement in place for him that could fill some of the shoes that Eric Weddle left. And then you had the whole Joey Bosa situation, just ridiculously idiotic by the organization for a guy in Bosa who came in, and let's face it, there was a lot of trash talking of that pick, myself included, and Bosa in the games that he's played this year has been an absolute stud. He's been utilized very well by San Diego, and he's made the most of that opportunity. Imagine if the San Diego Chargers had him for all 16 games like they should have, like a good organization would have had happen. So it's the specter of all this you think about, and you feel kind of bad for Mike McCoy. I don't think he's a terrible head coach at all. I don't think he's a particularly good one, but I don't think he's terrible. I think you take a situation where you've got a franchise quarterback, but injuries all over the place, an offensive line that doesn't run block very well, and in particular struggles to protect Phillip Rivers at times. It just, all these different things. Eric Weddle being let go for nothing. Joey Bosa not being there for all 16 games like he should have been to potentially dominate the entire season. All this talk of relocation. It's a tough situation. A lot of head coaches would not succeed, and most head coaches would not do much better than Mike McCoy. The simple fact of the matter is, the NFL, again, is a results-driven business, and you have to produce. And, this is not some knee-jerk reflex reactionary thing. There are reasons as to why Mike McCoy should be fired by the San Diego Chargers. He's had 4 seasons now, and in those 4 seasons, they've made 1 playoff appearance, and that was in year 1. Now, granted, his first 2 seasons were winning seasons, I think going 9-7, but last year was a disaster, and this year hasn't been a whole lot better. This is the second straight season with 10-plus losses with 1 game to go. This year, you look at a team that's really struggled to close out games, winnable games. And to me, sometimes that can be a measurement of talent. and saying, hey, you're coached hard, you're coached well, but you're just not good enough. Or it's B, a measure of coaching. Poor decisions, bad game management, bad play calls on the offensive defensive side of the ball. 8 losses by 7 points or less in 15 games. You handle your business differently in some of those games, you're potentially contending for a wild card spot in the AFC. Instead, the Chargers are sitting where they are right now, which is 5-10. Good teams win games that are close that they maybe should lose. Bad teams lose close games that they maybe should win. And the San Diego Chargers have been that team the last 2 years, and in particular this year, that team, that bad team that loses games that they really should have won. And in particular, when you're trying to make an argument for defending a guy's job, there was talk earlier in the year that if they didn't beat Denver in their first game against Denver, that he was gone. And then they won. And then you got to the point where the Chargers kind of hovering around 500. And you look at the schedule, it looks somewhat favorable, and people are talking about potentially the Chargers might run the table, or they might put together a nice winning streak and really make a run into the playoffs. And they've just kind of crapped out. 0-4 in December. 0-4. You're coaching for your job, and your team lays a goose egg for an entire month. That's not good. And then to top it all off, if this doesn't sink yet, I don't know what will. You lose to the Cleveland Browns on Saturday. The previously winless 0-14 Cleveland Browns gotcha. They beat you. That just can't happen. So you have a team that is trending in the wrong direction, back-to-back 10-plus loss seasons. You're basically wasting the remaining quality years of Phillip Rivers' career. You've basically, in a lot of ways, wasted most of his career anyways. You don't want to waste any more of it. Knowing that you're not going to get rid of him anytime soon, you want to maximize that time you have with Phillip Rivers, because that future without him could be very, very uncertain. On top of that, you're looking at maybe relocating to Los Angeles or somewhere else next year or the year after. How are you going to excite anybody about your organization relocating to a new market, trying to attract a new fan base with a guy like Mike McCoy leading the way, coming off of back-to-back 10-plus loss seasons, a team that consistently fails to close out close games? You can't. And for those reasons, some of the other ones I provided, Mike McCoy has to go. Now, maybe someday he deserves a second shot as an NFL head coach. Maybe he gets into a little bit of a better situation. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But he's not somebody that anybody should be beating down the door of to hire right now, that's for sure. Let him go back and be a decent offensive coordinator for somebody and see what happens. But, he just hasn't been good enough. The team hasn't been good enough. You can use injuries as an excuse, but there are other teams that overcome those injuries. I remember the 2010 Packers had gotten decimated by injuries, just decimated. And they end up winning the Super Bowl. Good teams find a way to overcome. Good coaches find a way to overcome. Good coaches find a way to put their staff and their players in positions to succeed. And Mike McCoy, more often than not, has failed during his tenure as the San Diego Chargers head coach. You don't want to waste any more Phillip Rivers' time. And in particular, if you're trying to get a new fan base excited with a relocation, you can't come back with this guy. Mike McCoy has to go, and probably should have already been fired. But I would expect come Black Monday, he'll be one of the first coaches to be let go, as he should be.